My family gave me a plastic plant for my birthday and spent $97,000 on my card buying luxury clothes. I didn't argue. I forwarded the bank statement. When they got home, the keys didn't work, and I was already far enough they'd never see me again. But let me start from the beginning, because what happened that day was just the final crack in something that had been breaking for years. I woke up on my 62nd birthday to complete silence. No cards slipped under my door, no flowers on the kitchen table, no phone calls. Just the usual emptiness of my house that somehow felt even more hollow than usual. I made myself coffee and sat at the table where I'd eaten thousands of meals alone, wondering if anyone would even remember. Around noon, my phone finally buzzed. Derek, my 35-year-old son. Mom, we're coming over at 3, family birthday celebration. No happy birthday, no warmth in his voice, just a statement like he was announcing a business meeting. I spent the afternoon cleaning a house that was already spotless. Before we continue, comment where you're watching from and subscribe to the channel. We'd love to see how far our stories are reaching, putting on my best dress and trying to push down the familiar knot of anxiety in my stomach. Maybe this time would be different. Maybe they'd finally see me as more than just, well, whatever it was they saw me as. At exactly 3 o'clock, I heard car doors slamming in my driveway. Through the window, I watched Derek climb out of his BMW, followed by Stephanie, his wife of 8 years. My daughter Emily pulled up right behind them in her Mercedes. They were all carrying shopping bags. Lots of shopping bags. My heart lifted slightly. Shopping bags meant gifts, didn't they? Derek walked in first, barely glancing at me. Hey, Mom. Stephanie followed, her designer heels clicking on my hardwood floors, already on her phone. Emily gave me a quick hug that felt more like an obligation than affection. Happy birthday, Mom, she said, but her eyes were already scanning the room like she was looking for something more interesting. They gathered in my living room, and I noticed they all had that particular energy about them. Excited, almost giddy. The kind of energy you get when you've had a really good day. We had the most amazing shopping trip, Stephanie announced, setting down multiple bags from Nordstrom, Saks, and Bloomingdale's. The sales were incredible. Derek nodded enthusiastically. Found this great jacket I've been wanting for months. Finally pulled the trigger. Emily was practically bouncing. And I got those shoes I showed you on Instagram, Steph. The ones that were back-ordered everywhere. I stood there, watching them celebrate their purchases, waiting for someone to acknowledge that we were here for my birthday. The shopping bags covered my coffee table, my sofa, even spilled onto the floor. Designer labels everywhere. That's wonderful, I managed. You all found such nice things. Then Derek reached into a small plastic bag, the kind you get from a gas station or dollar store, and pulled out something that made my breath catch in my throat. A plastic plant. Fake green leaves attached to a small plastic pot. The price tag was still on it. $3.99. Happy birthday, Mom, he said, holding it out to me with what I can only describe as a smirk. I stared at the thing in my hands. Around me, thousands of dollars worth of merchandise filled my living room. Clothes, shoes, accessories, all for them. And this plastic plant, which cost less than a cup of coffee, was mine. It's practical, Stephanie added helpfully. You can't kill it. The comment hit like a slap. I'd been gardening for 40 years. My backyard was full of roses, tomatoes, herbs I'd nurtured from seeds. But this plastic plant was what they thought I deserved. Thank you, I whispered, because what else could I say? They stayed for exactly 37 minutes. I know because I watched the clock, waiting for someone to suggest we do something special. Maybe go to dinner, or at least sit down and talk. Instead, they packed up their shopping bags, kissed my cheek like they were checking off a box, and left. I sat alone with that plastic plant, turning it over in my hands. That's when I noticed Derek had left his wallet on my side table. When I picked it up to call him back, a credit card fell out. My credit card, the one I'd given him for emergencies years ago. My hands were shaking as I logged into my bank account that evening. The first thing I saw was a charge from today. $3.99 at CVS Pharmacy, the plastic plant. Then I scrolled up and saw the rest. $97,000 in charges over the past 6 months. Nordstrom, $8,400. Saks Fifth Avenue, $1,200. Multiple charges at high-end restaurants, sometimes 3 or 4 times a week. A day spa, $1,800. Car payments I didn't recognize. Hotel stays in cities I'd never been to. While I'd been eating canned soup for dinner to save money, they'd been living like millionaires. My millionaires. I sat there until 2 in the morning, going through every single charge. Designer clothes, expensive dinners, weekend getaways, luxury hotel stays. A pattern going back months, maybe even years if I dug deeper. The plastic plant sat on my table, a monument to exactly how much I was worth to the family I'd raised, loved, and sacrificed everything for. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't call them demanding explanations. I didn't even get angry, not in the way you might expect. Instead, I felt something I'd never felt before in my 62 years of life. I felt done, completely, utterly done. And as I finally went to bed, holding that ridiculous plastic plant, I realized something that should have terrified me, but instead filled me with the strangest sense of calm. Tomorrow, everything was going to change. The next morning, I woke up before dawn with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. Maybe it was the shock, or maybe it was finally seeing the truth after decades of willful blindness. But I couldn't go back to sleep. I made coffee and sat at my kitchen table with my laptop, that plastic plant still mocking me from across the room. I started going through my bank statements, really going through them, not just glancing at the balances like I usually did, but examining every single transaction for the past 2 years. What I found made my stomach turn. The emergency credit card I'd given Derek just in case had been used 847 times. 847 times. For someone who supposedly only needed it for emergencies, he seemed to have a lot of them. I pulled up Derek's Facebook page, something I rarely did because it always made me feel like I was intruding on his life. But there he was, posting photos from expensive restaurants every week, Stephanie showing off new designer handbags, pictures from weekend trips to Napa Valley, Miami, New York, all while telling me they were struggling and couldn't afford to visit more often. The dates matched my credit card charges perfectly. Then I did something I should have done years ago. I called my friend Patricia, who worked at the bank. "Margaret, honey, I've been wondering when you'd ask about this," she said after I explained the situation. "I've been processing these charges for months. I thought maybe you were just being very generous with your family." "How much, Patricia? Total?" The silence on the other end lasted so long I thought the call had dropped. "Margaret, in the past 3 years, that card has been used for $347,000. I had to sit down. $347,000. More than half of everything I'd saved in 40 years of working double shifts, overtime, weekend jobs. More than the cost of my house. There's something else," Patricia continued gently. "The spending has increased dramatically since your husband passed. It's like they were waiting, my husband. Tom had died 4 years ago. And yes, the kids had been so helpful during that difficult time. Derek had insisted on handling the financial paperwork. Stephanie had taken care of organizing everything. Emily had managed the insurance claims. They'd been so helpful that I'd never questioned why they suddenly needed emergency money every few weeks after that. I hung up with Patricia and called Emily. "Mom, is everything okay? It's pretty early." "Emily, I need to ask you something. That job you told me you lost 6 months ago. The one where you needed help with rent?" A pause. "What about it?" "I just saw on LinkedIn that you've been working at Morrison & Associates this whole time." Another pause. Longer this time. "Mom, I can explain." "And the car repair that cost $4,800? The one where your transmission supposedly died? That's complicated." "Emily, I saw the restaurant charges. Michelin-starred restaurants don't fix transmissions." She sighed. And for a moment, I heard something that sounded like remorse. "Mom, we were going to pay you back. We always meant to pay you back." "With what money, Emily? You just bought a $3,000 purse yesterday." "How do you know that?" "Because I paid for it." The line went quiet. Then Emily's voice changed, became harder. "Mom, you've always been generous with us. We thought you enjoyed helping. Helping is paying for groceries when you're between jobs. This is something else entirely." "What are you saying?" I looked at that plastic plant again, and suddenly everything became crystal clear. "I'm saying I know what I'm worth to this family now. $3.99. Emily's voice got defensive. "That's not fair. We love you." "Do you? When was the last time you called me just to talk? When was the last time any of you visited without needing something?" She couldn't answer because we both knew the truth. Every phone call started with, "How are you?" and ended with, "Could you help us with?" Every visit included a request for money, always with a story about why they needed it right now. After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen thinking about the past 4 years. How Derek had moved back in with me for just a few months after his divorce, but somehow that had turned into 18 months of me paying his bills. How Stephanie always had medical emergencies that insurance supposedly wouldn't cover. How Emily's car always seemed to break down right before major holidays when she wanted to travel. I thought about how I'd worked at the hospital for 37 years, taking every overtime shift I could get. How I'd never taken vacations because there was always someone in the family who needed help with something. How I'd put off my own dental work, my own needs, always putting them first. The phone rang again. Derek this time. Mom, Emily called me. She's upset about some conversation you two had. Are you calling to explain how you've spent $347,000 of my money without telling me? Mom, that's not... Look, we always plan to pay you back. You know that. With what? You haven't held a steady job in 3 years. I'm between opportunities right now. The market is tough. The market is tough, but you went to Napa Valley last weekend. I have the hotel charges right here. Derek's voice got that familiar edge it took on when he was caught in something. Mom, we work hard. We deserve to enjoy life sometimes. On my dime, you raised us to believe family helps family. I raised you to be honest. I raised you to take responsibility for your own lives. Mom, you're being dramatic. It's not like you can't afford it. And there it was. The assumption that had been underlying everything for years, that my money was their money, that I existed to fund their lifestyle, that I had no needs, no dreams, no life of my own worth considering. Derek, let me ask you something. Do you know what I wanted for my birthday? What? I wanted my children to visit me because they love me, not because they needed something. I wanted a conversation that didn't end with a request for money. I wanted to feel like I mattered to you as more than just a bank account. Mom, of course you matter. I got a plastic plant, Derek. While you spent nearly $100,000 of my money buying things for yourselves, you gave me a plastic plant that cost less than $4. It was just a joke. We thought you'd think it was funny. What's funny about it? He couldn't answer that either. After I hung up, I sat in my quiet house and realized something that should have broken my heart but instead filled me with a strange sense of relief. My children didn't love me. They loved what I could give them. And the moment I stopped giving, they'd be gone anyway. The plastic plant sat there, a $3.99 symbol of my worth to the people I'd spent my entire adult life loving. But for the first time in years, I felt like I was worth more than that. Much more. For 3 days after that conversation with Derek, I didn't answer my phone. I let their calls go to voicemail, their texts pile up unread. I needed space to think, to plan, to figure out who I was when I wasn't being someone's personal ATM. I spent those days doing something I hadn't done in years. I thought about myself. What did I want? What made me happy? When was the last time I'd made a decision based on what I needed instead of what someone else expected from me? The answer was terrifying. I couldn't remember. On Thursday morning, I drove to the bank and asked to speak with a manager I didn't know, someone who wouldn't have 40 years of history with me, who wouldn't try to talk me out of what I was about to do. I need to understand my options, I told her, a young woman named Sandra, who looked at me with genuine concern when I explained the situation. Mrs. Henderson, I have to ask, are you being financially abused? The word hung in the air between us. Abused. I'd never thought of it that way, but Sandra was right. When someone takes your money without permission, lies about why they need it, and makes you feel guilty for questioning it, what else would you call it? Yes, I said quietly. I think I am. Sandra helped me understand exactly what I was dealing with. The credit cards in my name, but used exclusively by my children. The automatic transfers I'd authorized years ago that I'd forgotten about. The joint account Derek had talked me into opening for emergencies that had become his personal checking account. You have more power than you realize, Sandra told me. Everything is in your name. You can stop this whenever you want. I left the bank with a thick folder of paperwork and a new perspective. I wasn't trapped. I was choosing to be a victim, and I could choose to stop. That evening, I did something I hadn't done in decades. I called my sister Rose in Portland. Margaret, what a surprise. How are you, honey? Rose was 3 years older than me, and she'd moved to Oregon 30 years ago after her husband got a job there. We'd stayed in touch through Christmas cards and occasional phone calls, but I'd always felt like I couldn't burden her with my problems. She had her own life, her own family. Rose, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Of course. What's going on? I told her everything. The money, the lies, the plastic plant. When I finished, there was a long silence. Margaret, she said finally, how long has this been going on? Years. Since Tom died, really? And you've never said anything to anyone? I thought it was normal. Family helping family. Honey, family helping family is lending money for a down payment or helping with medical bills. This is theft. Hearing someone else say it made it real in a way it hadn't been before. This wasn't about ungrateful children or complicated family dynamics. This was theft, plain and simple. What should I do, Rose? What do you want to do? For the first time in 4 years, I knew the answer immediately. I want to disappear. Rose didn't try to talk me out of it. She didn't suggest family counseling or having a heart-to-heart conversation. She just said, then disappear. We talked for 2 hours. Rose told me about her life in Portland, about the small town outside the city where she lived, about how different life could be when you weren't constantly worrying about other people's problems. She painted a picture of a life I'd never imagined for myself. Quiet, peaceful, independent. There's a little cottage for rent 3 blocks from me, she said. The woman who lived there just moved to assisted living. It has a garden, Margaret, a real garden where you could grow actual plants. After I hung up with Rose, I sat in my kitchen looking at that plastic plant. Then I did something that felt like the first honest thing I'd done in years. I threw it in the trash. The next morning, I started making lists. What I needed to do, what I needed to pack, what I needed to leave behind. It was surprisingly liberating to realize how little I actually wanted to take with me. Most of the furniture held no sentimental value. It was just stuff I'd accumulated over the years. The photos that mattered could fit in a single box. I called Sandra at the bank. I want to close the joint account, I told her, and cancel the credit cards. All of them? Every single one they have access to. Mrs. Henderson. They'll notice immediately. I know. I opened a new checking account at a different bank across town. I had my pension and Social Security transferred there. I contacted a realtor about putting my house on the market. It's a seller's market right now, she told me. Houses in your neighborhood are selling within days. How quickly could we close? If you're flexible on price and find a cash buyer, 2 weeks, maybe 3. Perfect. I spent the weekend boxing up the things I wanted to keep. 4 decades of life fit into surprisingly few boxes. Photos, my mother's china, my gardening tools, a few books. Everything else could stay with the house or go to charity. Derek called Sunday evening. Mom, my card got declined at dinner tonight. There must be some mistake. No mistake, I said calmly. I closed the account. You what? Why would you do that? Because it's my money, Derek. Mom, you can't just cut us off like this. We have expenses, responsibilities. So do I. What's gotten into you? This isn't like you. He was right. The old Margaret would have apologized, would have reopened the account, would have felt guilty for causing problems. But something had shifted in me over the past week. Maybe it was seeing those numbers in black and white. Maybe it was Rose reminding me that I had choices. Maybe it was just finally understanding that I'd been living my entire adult life for other people. You're right, I told Derek. This isn't like me. The old me would have kept enabling you indefinitely, but that person gave you a 40-year free ride and she's tired. Mom, we can work this out. We can set up a payment plan. Derek, when was the last time you asked me how I was doing and actually listened to the answer? He couldn't answer. When was the last time you visited me without needing something? Still nothing. When was the last time you thought about what I might want or need? Mom, this is ridiculous. The answer is never, Derek. You have never, not once in your adult life, considered what I might want or need. I exist to solve your problems and fund your lifestyle. And the moment I can't do that anymore, I'll be completely worthless to you. That's not true. Prove it. He hung up on me. I sat in my quiet house, surrounded by moving boxes, and felt lighter than I had in years. For the first time since Tom died, I was making decisions based on what I wanted, instead of what everyone else expected from me. The plastic plant was gone, but I was still here, and I was worth so much more than $3.99. The house sold in 4 days. A young couple with cash, no inspection needed, closing in 10 days. The realtor was amazed, but I wasn't surprised. I'd priced it to move quickly, and I didn't care about getting every last dollar. Money had caused me nothing but heartache. I just wanted out. I had 10 days to disappear completely. I worked methodically, like I was planning a military operation. Utilities disconnected after closing. Mail forwarded to a P.O. box Rose had set up for me in Portland. Phone number changed to an Oregon area code. I even closed my accounts at the local grocery store, the pharmacy, anywhere that had my information on file. The children kept calling, of course. Derek's calls grew increasingly angry. Emily tried the guilt approach. Stephanie left voicemails crying about how I was tearing the family apart. I listened to each message once, then deleted it. The only person I told about my plans was my neighbor, Mrs. Chen, who'd lived next door for 15 years. She was the one person I'd miss. You're doing the right thing, she told me as we sat on my back porch for the last time. I've watched those children of yours treat you like a bank for years. My daughter lives in Seattle, calls me every week just to chat. That's what children should do. I feel guilty leaving without saying goodbye. Margaret, when someone steals from you repeatedly, you don't owe them a goodbye. Mrs. Chen was right, but it didn't make it easier. Despite everything, these were still my children. I'd changed their diapers, bandaged their scraped knees, held them when they cried. But somewhere along the way, they'd stopped seeing me as their mother and started seeing me as their bank account. 2 days before closing, Derek showed up at my door. I watched him through the window, standing on my porch with his hands in his pockets, looking uncomfortable. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "Mom, we need to talk." "About what?" "About this crazy idea you have about selling the house. Emily told me you found a buyer." "It's not crazy. It's done. We close Thursday." His face went pale. "Mom, you can't sell this house. This is our family home. This is where we grew up. And now you're grown up. You don't need me or this house anymore. Where are you going to live? Somewhere else." "Mom, be reasonable. If you need space, we can give you space. We don't have to visit as often." I almost laughed, as if the problem was that they visited too much. "Derek, when was the last time you visited me just because you wanted to see me? I visit you all the time. When was the last time you visited without asking for money?" He opened his mouth, then closed it. We both knew the answer. That's not the point." "That's exactly the point. You don't see me as your mother anymore. You see me as a resource to be managed." "Mom, that's not fair. We love you. You love my money." Derek's face flushed red. "You know what? Fine. If you want to throw away 40 years of family history over money, that's your choice. But don't expect us to come running when you're old and alone and regret this decision." The threat was meant to scare me, but it had the opposite effect. It confirmed everything I'd been thinking. Even now, even when I was trying to have an honest conversation with him, he couldn't see me as anything other than someone who should be grateful for his attention. "Derek, I'm already old and alone. The difference is, now I won't be broke too." He stormed off without another word. Thursday morning arrived gray and drizzly. Perfect weather for endings. I met with the lawyer at 9, signed the papers, and handed over the keys to a house I'd lived in for 23 years. By noon, I had a cashier's check for $127,000 after all the fees and paying off the remaining mortgage. The moving truck had come Wednesday. Everything I owned now fit in my Honda Civic: clothes, photos, my mother's china carefully wrapped and packed in the back seat, and my gardening tools. 40 years of life reduced to what could fit in a small car. I drove slowly through my old neighborhood one last time, past the elementary school where I'd dropped Derek and Emily off every morning, past the grocery store where I'd shopped for decades, past the hospital where I'd worked for 37 years. I felt like I was saying goodbye to a life that had never really been mine anyway. The drive to Portland took 12 hours. I stopped only for gas and coffee, afraid that if I stopped for too long, I might lose my nerve. But as the miles accumulated behind me, I felt something I hadn't expected. Relief. Pure, overwhelming relief. I wasn't running away from something. I was running toward something, toward a life where I mattered, where my needs counted, where I could make decisions based on what I wanted instead of what everyone else expected. Rose was waiting for me when I pulled into her driveway at 8:30 that night. She looked older than I'd expected, but her smile was exactly the same as when we were children. "Margaret," she said, wrapping me in a hug that felt like coming home. "You made it." I made it. She helped me unload the car, chattering about the cottage, about the town, about the people I'd meet, but what struck me most was how she talked to me, like I was a person with thoughts and opinions and preferences, like what I wanted mattered. The cottage was perfect. Small but bright, with hardwood floors and windows that looked out on a garden that had been neglected, but had good bones. I could see potential everywhere, places where I could plant roses, where I could grow tomatoes, where I could create something beautiful just for myself. The woman who lived here before Helen, she was 91 when she moved to assisted living, Rose told me as we stood in the kitchen. Independent right up until the end. She said this house needs someone who will love it. I looked around at the empty rooms, at the garden waiting outside, at the beginning of a life I'd never imagined for myself. For the first time in years, I felt excited about tomorrow. "I can love it," I said. That night, I called Derek's number one last time. Not to reconcile, not to explain myself, but to say the words I should have said years ago. "Derek, this is Margaret. I want you to know that I forgive you for taking my money. I forgive Emily and Stephanie too, but forgiveness doesn't mean I'm willing to let it continue. I've changed my number and I won't be sharing the new one. I hope you figure out how to take care of yourselves." I hung up before he could respond and immediately blocked the number. Then I sat in my new cottage, surrounded by boxes that contained everything I'd chosen to keep, and felt something I hadn't felt in decades. Peace. It took 3 weeks for them to find me. I was kneeling in my new garden, planting late-season tomatoes in the Oregon soil, when my neighbor across the street knocked on my gate. "Margaret, There's been a man in a white Honda asking about you, says he's your son. Seemed pretty agitated. My heart jumped, but not with joy, with something closer to dread. I'd known this moment would come, but I'd hoped for more time to establish myself in this new life before they tracked me down. Thank you for letting me know, Carol. If he comes back, please don't tell him I'm here. Carol nodded, understanding immediately. Honey, I raised 4 kids. I know the difference between a child who's worried about their mother and one who's mad about money. That evening, Derek called my old number again. Of course, he didn't know I'd changed it, so the call went nowhere. But he left a voicemail with Mrs. Chen, my former neighbor, and she forwarded it to me. His voice was tight with barely controlled anger. Mom, I know you're out there somewhere. This is ridiculous. You can't just disappear and expect us to figure everything out on our own. Emily's car payment is due, and Stephanie needs money for the kids' school supplies. You're being selfish and childish, and when you come to your senses, we'll be here. But don't expect us to just forget this tantrum you're throwing. I played the message twice, listening for any hint of concern for my well-being, any acknowledgement that he might have done something wrong, any recognition that I was a person with needs beyond writing checks for his family. There was nothing. The next morning, Rose came over with coffee and the kind of blunt honesty only sisters can provide. He found Mrs. Patterson's phone number somehow. Called her last night asking about you. Mrs. Patterson was Rose's next-door neighbor, an elderly woman who'd lived in the area for 60 years and knew everyone. What did she tell him? That she'd never heard of you. Bless her heart, she's sharp as a tack when she wants to be. I should have felt relieved. But instead, I felt sad. The desperation in Derek's voice wasn't about missing me. It was about missing my money. Even now, even after everything, he couldn't see past what I could provide for him. Rose, do you think I'm being too harsh? Margaret, let me tell you something. When my David was going through his divorce 15 years ago, he needed help. Real help. So I helped him with the lawyer fees, let him stay in my guest room for 6 months, helped him get back on his feet. You know what he did the day he got his first paycheck from his new job? What? He insisted on paying me back. Every penny. Said he couldn't feel good about himself until he did. That's what children do when they respect their parents. They don't want to be a burden. The contrast was stark. I tried to imagine Derek or Emily ever insisting on paying me back, ever expressing gratitude for my sacrifices, ever considering how their constant requests for money affected me. I couldn't. 3 days later, Emily found me. I was at the farmer's market, buying fresh peaches from a vendor who'd been telling me about her organic farming methods, when I heard a familiar voice behind me. Mom, I turned around, and there was Emily, looking tired and stressed, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She'd driven 11 hours to find me. Emily, how did you— Derek hired a private investigator. It wasn't cheap. Of course he did. Spending money he didn't have to track me down so he could ask for more money he didn't deserve. Can we talk? Her voice was softer than I'd expected, almost pleading. We walked to a small cafe near the market. Emily ordered coffee with shaking hands, and I noticed she looked thinner than when I'd last seen her. Mom, we need you to come home. This is my home now. No, it's not. Home is where your family is. My family abandoned me years ago, Emily. You just didn't notice because I kept paying for everything. She flinched. We never abandoned you. When was the last time you called me just to see how I was doing? Emily stared at her coffee cup. We've been busy. You know how it is with work. And when was the last time you visited me without asking for money? Silence. When was the last time any of you remembered my birthday without me having to remind you? Mom. Stop. I can't stop, Emily. Because for the first time in my life, I'm thinking about these questions, and the answers are terrifying. Tears started running down Emily's face. For a moment, I thought maybe we were finally going to have the honest conversation we'd needed for years. Mom, I'm sorry about the plant. It was Derek's idea, and it was stupid and mean. This isn't about the plant. Then what is it about? It's about the fact that you spent $100,000 of my money and gave me a $3 plant as a joke. It's about the fact that you think my needs don't matter. It's about the fact that you see me as an ATM instead of a person. Emily wiped her eyes with a napkin. We don't see you that way. Then why are you here, Emily? Because we miss you. You miss my money. That's not true. Prove it. Tell me you're here because you love me and want to spend time with me, not because you need something. Emily opened her mouth, then closed it. The silence stretched between us, filled with 40 years of unspoken truths. Finally, she spoke, and her voice was so quiet I almost couldn't hear her. Derek's BMW got repossessed. Stephanie's credit cards are maxed out. I'm 3 months behind on my rent. There it was. The real reason she'd driven 11 hours to find me. Emily, you're 30 years old. These are your problems to solve. But you're our mother. You're supposed to help us. I helped you for 30 years. I worked overtime to pay for your college. I covered your rent when you were between jobs. I bought your car, paid for your wedding, bailed Derek out of debt more times than I can count. When does it end? Mom, please. We can't do this without you. You're going to have to learn. Emily's face hardened. Fine, if you want to be selfish and abandon your own children, that's your choice. But don't expect us to forgive you for this. She stood up to leave, then turned back with something in her eyes I'd never seen before. Pure hatred. You know what, Mom? Derek was right. You are just a bitter old woman who cares more about money than family. We're better off without you. She walked away, leaving me sitting alone at the cafe with the echo of words that should have devastated me, but instead filled me with an unexpected sense of freedom. They'd finally said out loud what I'd always suspected, that their love was conditional on my financial support, that the moment I stopped giving, they'd stop caring. I finished my coffee slowly, watching the people at the farmer's market. Families shopping together, couples holding hands, children playing. Real relationships built on love and respect, not financial dependency. When I got home, I found Rose sitting on my front porch with a bottle of wine. Rough day? She asked. Emily found me. And now I know for certain that I made the right decision. That night, I blocked Emily's number too. Then Derek's. Then Stephanie's. One by one, I removed their ability to reach me, to guilt me, to manipulate me. For the first time in 40 years, I was truly free. But freedom, I was learning, sometimes comes with a price. As I sat in my cottage that night, surrounded by the quiet peace of my new life, I felt something I hadn't expected. Grief. Not for the relationships I'd lost, but for the relationships I'd never really had. For the mother I'd been, but the love I'd never received. For the decades I'd spent hoping things would change when the truth was, they never could. Tomorrow I would start over. But tonight, I let myself mourn the family I'd always wanted, but never had. 2 years later, I was pruning my rose bushes when Carol from across the street came over with her mail. Margaret, I think this got delivered to my box by mistake. It was a letter addressed to me, but with my old last name and no return address. The handwriting was shaky, uncertain. I didn't recognize it. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a newspaper clipping. The letter was from Mrs. Chen, my old neighbor. Dear Margaret, I hope this finds you well. I wanted you to know that Derek came by last week asking if I'd heard from you. He looked terrible. Thin, tired, older than his years. He said they've been struggling since you left. Emily lost her apartment and had to move back in with Derek and Stephanie. Derek's been working at a gas station. Stephanie took a job at a call center. I thought you should know. I also thought you should see this. The newspaper clipping was from the local paper back home, a small item in the police blotter. Derek Henderson, 37, arrested for shoplifting groceries from Safeway, released on recognizance. I sat on my porch steps, holding the letter and clipping, waiting to feel something. Guilt, maybe. Regret. The urge to rescue them one more time. But all I felt was a deep, quiet sadness. Not for their situation, but for the fact that even now, even in their desperation, Derek had come looking for me to Mrs. Chen's house. Not to apologize, not to ask how I was, but to see if I'd heard from me, which meant he was still looking for my money, not me. I folded the letter and clipping carefully and put them in my kitchen drawer. Then I went back to my roses. My life in Oregon had become something I'd never imagined possible. Simple, peaceful, mine. I'd gotten a part-time job at the local library. Something I'd always dreamed of doing but never had time for when I was supporting 3 adults and their endless crises. The work was quiet and satisfying. Helping people find books, organizing community reading programs, managing the small garden outside the library entrance. I'd made friends. Real friends, not people who tolerated me because I paid for things. There was Helen, the librarian who'd become my closest confidant. Janet, who lived 2 blocks away and brought me vegetables from her garden. The book club that met at my cottage once a month, where we discussed novels and drank wine and talked about everything except money. These people knew me as Margaret, not as Derek's mother or Emily's bank account. They liked me for my laugh, my terrible jokes, my ability to grow tomatoes in Oregon's challenging soil. They had no idea I'd ever had money, and they didn't care. 6 months after the letter from Mrs. Chen, Rose knocked on my door with a concerned expression. Margaret, there's a woman at my house who says she's your daughter, Emily. She's been crying and asking to see you. My stomach tightened. What did you tell her? That I'd ask if you wanted to see her. She says it's important. I almost said no automatically, but something in Rose's expression made me pause. She's not angry this time, Rose continued gently. She seems broken. I found Emily sitting on Rose's porch, and Rose was right. She looked nothing like the woman who'd confronted me at the cafe 2 years ago. Her clothes were worn, her hair needed cutting, and she'd lost weight she couldn't afford to lose. But more than that, something in her eyes was different. The entitlement was gone, replaced by something that looked like genuine despair. Mom, her voice was barely a whisper. Emily, can we talk? We walked to my cottage in silence. I made tea, a ritual that gave us both time to figure out what to say. Mom, I came to apologize. I waited. Not because I want anything. I mean, I do want something, but not money. I want to tell you that you were right. About everything. Emily's hand shook as she lifted her teacup. After you left, everything fell apart. Not just financially, but we fell apart. Derek started drinking. Stephanie blamed me for not stopping you from leaving. I realized that we didn't know how to be a family without you managing everything. Go on. We never learned how to take care of ourselves because you always did it for us. We never learned how to solve problems because you always solved them. We never learned how to be responsible because you were always there to clean up our messes. I felt something shift in my chest, but I stayed quiet. Mom, we treated you terribly. We took and took and took, and we never gave anything back. We never even said thank you. We just expected it, like it was our right to have you sacrifice everything for us. Emily started crying then. Not the manipulative tears I'd seen so many times before, but deep, wrenching sobs that seemed to come from somewhere genuine. I don't know how to be an adult. Mom, I'm 32 years old, and I don't know how to pay bills or budget money or solve problems on my own. You did everything for us for so long that we never learned. Emily, I'm not asking you to come back. I'm not asking for money, I'm asking for forgiveness. Not because I deserve it, but because I need to say I'm sorry for spending your entire life and giving you nothing but selfishness in return. We sat in silence for a long time. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, and saw something I'd never seen before. Genuine remorse. Real understanding of what she'd done. The beginning of actual maturity. Emily, I forgive you. You do? I forgave you a long time ago. Forgiveness isn't about whether you deserve it. It's about me being able to move forward. Could we maybe stay in touch? Not like before. I don't want your money. I miss having a mom. I considered this carefully. What would that look like? I don't know. Maybe phone calls sometimes? Maybe I could visit once in a while just to see how you're doing. I want to learn how to be someone you could be proud of. You'd have to prove that. Emily, you'd have to show me that you've changed. I will. I'm trying. I got a job at a nonprofit helping people apply for government assistance. It doesn't pay much, but it's honest work, and I'm learning how to help people instead of just taking from them. Something in her voice convinced me she meant it. All right, we can try. But Emily, I won't be supporting you financially ever again. If you need money, you'll have to figure it out yourself. I understand. I don't want your money, Mom. I want your respect. That was 3 months ago. Emily calls me once a week now just to talk. She tells me about her job, her tiny apartment, the budgeting class she's taking. She asks about my garden, my friends, my life. Real questions that show she sees me as a person, not just a parent. Derek hasn't called. According to Emily, he's still angry, still blaming me for his problems. Maybe someday he'll figure it out like Emily did. Maybe he won't. Either way, it's not my responsibility anymore. This morning, I was transplanting seedlings in my greenhouse when Helen stopped by with coffee and news. Margaret, the city council approved your proposal for the community garden project. I'd submitted a plan to turn an unused lot downtown into a public garden where people could grow their own vegetables. It was something I'd never had time to dream about when I was busy funding other people's dreams. They want you to manage it, Helen continued. Paid position, 20 hours a week, you'd be perfect for it. I looked around my own garden, at the tomatoes climbing their stakes, at the roses I'd nursed back to health, at the herbs I'd planted just because I liked their smell. Everything here was something I'd chosen to grow, chosen to nurture, chosen to love. For 62 years, I'd been tending other people's gardens, helping other people's dreams grow while my own withered from neglect. But gardens, I'd learned, are resilient. With the right care, even the most neglected soil can bloom again. I'll take it, I told Helen. That evening, I sat on my porch with a glass of wine, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. My phone rang. Emily's weekly call. Hi, Mom. How was your day? Good. Really good. I got some exciting news about a job. Tell me everything. As I told her about the community garden, I realized something that filled me with quiet joy. This conversation, a daughter interested in her mother's life, asking questions, sharing in her excitement, this was what I'd always wanted. What I'd thought was impossible. It had taken losing everything to find it. After we hung up, I walked through my garden one more time before dark. In the corner where I'd first planted vegetables 2 years ago, something caught my eye. A small volunteer tomato plant had sprouted, grown from seeds that had fallen from last year's harvest. I smiled, remembering the plastic plant that had started all of this, that fake thing that was supposed to represent my worth to my family. This little tomato plant, growing wild and free in soil I'd prepared with my own hands, was real. Like my new life. Like my self-respect. Like the love I'd finally learned to give myself. I was 64 years old, and I was just beginning to bloom.